Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 370, recorded Monday, October 6th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, and it's recorded every Monday. You get video versions on YouTube and Spotify and your favorite podcasting platforms for the audio. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're listening. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Johnny. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello. Yes, it's been a fun show already, actually. We've been talking in the Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast, about Three-Body Problem, which I've been reading the books of, and Joel has just taken his first steps into the show. So if you want a little bit of extra pop culture, you can join the Render Distance by getting any of our paid tiers on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And we'd love to have more people join. It's our first episode of the month, so we want to say a quick thank you to all of the new patrons who came on board in September, and new annual members as well, because we have annual subscriptions on Patreon. We're not going anywhere with this show. We are covering Minecraft for the foreseeable future, so an annual Patreon membership is available if you want to take advantage of that. You can also take advantage of other patron events. We have monthly hangouts. We have a quarterly hangout every so often where we do behind-the-scenes facts and figures of the podcast, but the monthly hangouts are usually where our patrons can share what they've been up to in Minecraft that month, and I expect this month there'll be a lot of people diving into the Copper Age.
Speaking of the Copper Age, it has arrived, and that's what we're talking about this week on the show. We're also going to turn our spyglass towards the horizon, looking at the Mounts of Mayhem snapshots that may be coming later on this month. So to kick things off, what have you been doing in Minecraft?
I have absolutely dived into the Copper Age myself, being somebody who updates pretty much immediately with the survival guide world. Everything's vanilla, so I can just load it up in the latest version and go to town. The town I'm going to specifically is the Windy City because I need some storage there, and it seemed like the ideal opportunity to take advantage of Copper Golem mechanics. So I've grafted some storage onto the side of my Happy Ghast garages. It sort of uses a road that I was building out, assuming it was going to connect to the train station building eventually. And I decided what better thing to store in the train station with it being a central hub than something like a storage system. So this looks very similar to the storage I have built over at my spawn base, where there are lots of chests in the floor that represent the bulk storage, but then above those in barrels are all of the products of those wood types, for example. So, above all of the oak logs, I have the oak stairs, slabs, fences, trapdoors, all of that kind of thing. That can now be automatically sorted for me by Copper Golems, and it was the idea that I had of them to begin with, of like, okay, great, I can probably convince the Copper Golems in some way or another to help me sort all of those miscellaneous bits and pieces. It came together pretty well, did a couple of mock-ups of it in Creative. I'll be talking more about that a little bit later, because my experience with the Copper Golem so far has been really great. I think it's been something that I had to plan ahead in order to really understand how the Copper Golem was going to be able to help. It wasn't something I could just pop down in my existing storage system, but now I've designed a setup specifically for it. It's working exactly how I want it to. And the fun part of that is that now I can have it sort a bunch of items by color instead of by material type in the instances where it matters. So I've got a set of color storage that's all marked out with the colored concrete blocks, but in each of those chests is going to be the dyes, the wool, the carpet, the stained glass and glass panes, terracotta and glazed terracotta, concrete powder and concrete. And that conveniently fits into the 9 slots of like the chest inventory. So I can just have columns of each of those materials, and as long as those are the 9 things I want to store in there, then the Golem can help me filter them. So really nice. And in the process, I have found out that compact and tileable redstone is a tricky problem to solve. So that was the major hurdle I had to get over. I've been building these test filters in creative mode snapshots when I've been messing around with the Copper Golem before, and it's required fairly minimal redstone components, but I've been building them like 2 blocks wide and not thinking too much about how it needs to fit with the existing storage filter I have for the bulk material, and right. Where redstone might activate something below it if it's powering a block that could lock a hopper that I don't want it to lock, and all that kind of stuff. So I think I've got it down to a fine art, and for the folks who want to look in the show notes, I've included a screenshot of the full 2-stage item filter. So the part on the lower half is your standard Impulse SV item filter that filters objects down into the double chests for storage, but then above that there's a smaller item filter circuit that's designed for copper golems to put stuff in the chest, and then once they put a certain amount in, it gets filtered down into the barrel. So that's working out pretty much the way I expected it to. I've also been using shelves for decoration, getting into some of the stuff with that. So yeah, all in all, enjoying my time in the Copper Age so far.
How did you solve the problem with the copper golem chest setup so that the items that you have in there, I'm assuming, are various different kinds of items, because you're talking about sorting different wood products, from the bulk storage. So, well, like, what's the comparator signal, and how do you keep the filter from emptying things in the chest all the way down into the storage chest, like in the receiving chest?
So it works pretty much the same way as a regular item filter does, where a redstone torch will lock the hopper that's outputting stuff into whatever the eventual endpoint of the storage system is, which in this case is a barrel. And so the comparator signal is usually just going to be 1 power, and then you want to extend it to 2 power when the golem puts more stuff in, so that completes the circuit, switches off that redstone torch, and allows stuff to drain out of the key chest, as I'm thinking of it, like the one that tells the copper golem all of the stuff to fit in. But you can fit a lot of items into a chest before it will output a comparator signal strength of 2, because it does it based on the amount of items and the total capacity of the chest in terms of like full item stacks, as opposed to just how many slots of the chest are filled with like one item. Right. So the bottom row of the chest basically is all of the different wood items. In this case, it's like, shelves, trapdoors, fences, fence gates, planks, stairs, slabs, even like the 6-sided bark blocks and stripped logs and things like that. The things that I know I'm not going to have in bulk supply, I usually kind of craft them as I need them. Those take up like at most the bottom half of the chest, and then the copper golem is always going to put stuff in the top left when it adds items to the chest. And so even if there's like a stack of planks further down that hasn't completely filled up, it's always going to put fresh planks in the top left corner. And so with the amount of items I have, adding to a couple of those stacks just to make sure the comparator signal strength rises to 2 every time the copper golem puts anything in there, that means like the signal is only going to increase and turn off the redstone torch when new items are put in. And the great thing about that is there are some items like signs, for example, only stack to 16. So it would be easier to make a higher comparator signal if you put signs and stuff in. But because they're being put in the top left, the signal is always going to drain down to the amount of items you had in the filter before that. It's a concept that I'll also go into in a survival guide video for those of you who are visual learners and can't quite picture all of this from me explaining it verbally. It's working really well for me so far, and so this is a system I imagine I'll use in other scenarios as well, wherever there are lots of different items that I'm bringing back to a storage area. I can also see people using this for the output of something like a multi-crafter setup. If you just wanted a bunch of stuff crafted, say from iron from your iron farm, you could output all of that into a copper chest and then have the copper golems sort all of that for you into individual storage if you just had a bunch of chests on the other side of the room. The main thing I had to be sure of in this case is that I didn't have more than 10 chests in a row. The greatest thing about that is that we have 12 wood types in the game so far. So I've only needed to have 6 chests on either side of this hallway, with 1 copper golem serving each kind of set of 6, and then I've got room for 2 more chests at the end that could be expansions if they add more wood types in future. But then with the 16 colors, I've split those 8 on one side, 8 on the other side, and then made sure there is 1 extra chest on the end of the setup that if the copper golem can't find the corresponding item in any of those things, it just drops it in there, and that goes into like an overflow barrel that I could even set up like a redstone lamp to switch on to say that, hey, the copper golem's rejected this one item, it couldn't find a spot for it. Maybe I either need to make an item like a space for it at some stage, or I just need to put that into a different storage filter and have it go through. Like I've thrown some wood in with the colorful items by mistake. Like if I throw a mangrove log in with the red items or something like that, the copper golem's just going to spit that out the other side, and I can collect it and put it with the wood where it belongs.
Cool. Yeah, this is where I think it could end up being useful for me. I'll get into more of that later on in the show when we get into the main discussion. But essentially, replacing your barrel with a shulker box for me would be
Yeah,
key,
perfect.
because like my manual shulker boxes are basically like 3 or 4 stacks of logs for the wood shulker box. Choose your wood type, and then the rest of the shulker box is like fences and buttons and pressure plates and stairs and slabs and like all the different things that you make with and build with quite often, in various quantities. And so it would be great to have what essentially is you have programmed the key chest to have like these are the things that will go in here, and no matter what goes in, it just goes out as fast as it comes in. So then the chest is never going to reach a signal output of 3 or 2 or like whatever the main signal is. It's never going to go beyond that because it's removed so quickly. And the copper golems, unlike a hopper, just don't put things in there fast enough
Yeah.
to push it beyond its capacity. Which, because that was the thing that I think originally when I was talking with Impulse about his design for the filter, it was the overflow protection that kind of like set his filter apart from what people were already doing. So
Yeah.
when you had a really big farm and a really, high amount of items coming in, there was this potential where the signal could bleed over into the slice next door until the signal strength was increased for the standard bulk filter. And like you, like I don't want to build a bulk filter for every single item in Minecraft, because like I don't need double chests full of chains or nuggets or like whatever the other things are that you're bringing in. Like you typically only need, a few stacks at a time of some of the less, we'll say prominent blocks, like the more intricate decorative blocks. You don't need tons and tons of them. So I think it's a nice balance to kind of have a bulk sorter for your main sort of like when you need tons and tons of something. Like if you get a craft, like, I don't know, like several hundred stacks of stairs, not 100, but like several hundred stairs, you're going to want to grab from your bulk chest and just manually craft those. Where if you only need a half dozen, like you want to go to your barrel and just like grab the stack that's in there or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I haven't really factored in stuff like overflow protection in this system yet. I'm relying on, in the case of, I think the only place it might happen is in the colored material. If I'm using a lot of like red terracotta and I have like enough to fill up multiple chests in there, then it might backfill into the system and then it might just be left in that chest. I think the main thing there is just providing enough storage below that. Which is why I've got like 3 or 4 double chests serving each of the slices that have all of the colorful material in, because at that point I'm fairly confident that I'm not going to like have too little storage for any of it.
Yeah.
And it's only the bottom chest that I think I'm planning on sorting so that it's always got columns of dye and terracotta and everything else. The rest of it can just go higgledy-piggledy in all of the chests behind the scenes that I'm not going to see. But yeah, like I think there will be versions of this that people will plan for with overflow protection. I think you could probably manage that pretty easily. But yeah, for now, for getting to grips with the Copper Golem, I think this has been a really fun project.
Awesome. I put together a pretty fun project on the Mushroom Island on the Citadel this week. I finished up a shulker box farm. I decided to bite the bullet and start making some production facilities. And it was a little bit, I don't want to say tedious, it was a little time consuming to build, only because I had to follow a tutorial on YouTube from the archivists step by step. If I have to tear this down or put it somewhere else, it's really not that difficult. It's a fair amount of material. A lot of slabs, a lot of scaffolding, but not a hard build once you kind of know how it works. And to explain that, essentially what happens is there's about 10 snow golems in the middle chamber, and you not release them, but you reveal them by turning on a trapdoor that opens up them to be targeted by a shulker. The shulker can't reach them because of some water that flows over top of them, and the shulker ends up shooting itself, which as of 117, I think, or 118, the shulker will duplicate if it's hit by its own bullet. What then happens with the rest of the farm is that scaffolding is read as a block that a shulker box cannot teleport through. When it looks at scaffolding, it looks like a solid floor. But when it's on a upside down slab that it can teleport to upside down, it looks at the scaffolding and says, I can't open. Like I can't open up my top. Therefore, this isn't a good place to stay. So it teleports again. and again and again. And the idea is that these things teleport up and up and up until they're out of the teleport range of the original shulker, and then they end up in these two little holding areas where they eventually entity cram, where you get 23 in each little cell, and then they just start dying. Well, in addition to being there, they also have line of sight, or at least detection range, of the golems. So then these 46 shulkers start shooting down towards the golems. So now you have the shulker that's already down there, plus the 46 that are up at the top, all shooting towards the golems, all hitting this one shulker that then teleports and duplicates. So once this thing ramps up, it's kind of overpowered. Like I ran it for half a stream. It might have even been up for an hour, and I have a chest of shulker boxes, so shulker shells, so 1,700 shulker shells in like a very short amount of time, to the point where I'm not sure I'm going to have to run it again, which it feels a little bit broken. Like the fact that this actually exists. I mean, it's very cool that the archivists have, looked at those game mechanics and figured out how to do it. But it's also one of those farms that when I went looking for a simpler shulker farm, like I know I don't need a ton. This is just for me. I couldn't find one any simpler. This was basically the easiest way to do it. And so because of that, it's just like, well, now it's kind of done, and I don't think I'm going to have to turn it on again. Now, I do want to make farms that are going to produce things, and I'm going to use shulker box loaders instead of just putting things into double chests to keep myself from having like reams of double chests of loose items. I'm going to have like shulker boxes, but I can't see myself needing more than a single double chest full of shulker boxes that are full of items for, like, I don't know, a sugarcane farm or gunpowder or whatever. So I will need some shulker boxes, but I'm not sure I'm going to need them at the capacity that this thing can pump out. So one option I think would be for people to think about maybe a different way of killing the shulker boxes. So if you weren't using the entity cramming at the top, there wouldn't be 46 shulkers kind of supercharging the farm, and therefore you'd be getting more like a dozen shulker boxes every hour or something like that, or something a little bit slower, which would be a little bit more, I guess, manageable. It is really cool to have all the shulker boxes. It completely eliminates my storage problems, because I was trying to stay organized and I was having all these different blocks, and because I'm now building a new area, I needed new types of items. I'm going to expand my concrete now to have probably a shulker box for each color of concrete, because I'm sure I'm going to be using a lot of it. Same thing with some other blocks that are a little bit more sci-fi-esque. So it's going to be good to have that kind of stuff. I imagine I'm going to be using a lot of glass too. So I have the ability to expand. And then somebody on my stream mentioned, like, well, you could always decorate with shulker boxes. Like, that's not a bad idea. It's not something that you really do that much, but if it's of a texture that works in a sci-fi build, then like, why not? They have a really unique top to them. They have a really unique bottom to them as well. So if you wanted to use them as a decorative thing, then great. So I might do that. And that's not where I stopped. I actually went out and started diving into the cave, the lush cave, and doing some squid farming, some glow squid farming, excuse me, and some gunpowder creeper farming. Now the creeper farm is still a work in progress, but the squid farm actually worked out pretty well. I went off the cuff. I looked up the mechanics. They spawn at Y level 30 or lower, and they just need darkness. So I just made a tinted glass tank and put in some magma blocks that pull the squid down when they swim into the columns. There's a hopper minecart going underneath them, and it collects stuff. It's not super efficient because inside of the lush cave, there's a number of waterfalls that look really cool, but also spawn their own fish and aquatic mobs, including glow squid. So I'm only getting maybe 24 to 32 ink sacs an hour or more. Like it's not fast, but I don't need a lot. But the idea there is that I want to start decorating with glow ink on signs to provide like that neon lighting detail, trying to do some cool stuff with that in the sci-fi area. So I want to have enough glow ink on hand that I can experiment with it and not run into bottlenecks where it's like, well, I really like to see how cool this would look, but if I only have like a dozen glow ink sacks, then I really can't experiment very well. So this will hopefully fix that. And then in the same lush cave, I'm also building a creeper farm, because while I do have a shulker box full of gunpowder, it goes pretty fast. And as I'm using the rockets to move around, as this island and build expands, I'm going to be using the rockets a lot more. If I have to start going over to the desert to get sand, I'm going to have to fly there. So it's going to be something where gunpowder is going to be essential. And I decided against a general mob farm. Like I just looked at it. It's like, I don't really need all of the things that it's going to pump out. And if I do decide that I need something specific like string or bones or something, I'll make a different farm for it and just kind of deal with it that way. But this is actually another golem powered farm. The snow golems are in the middle. There's 3 of them on a single floor, and they basically just shoot at the creepers. The spawn floor is organized so there's carpets every 2 blocks so no spiders can spawn, and of course you put trapdoors on the roof so that it's only tall enough for creepers. And the creepers get shot and aggroed by the golems. They then attempt to walk up to the golems and blow up, but they don't get there because the only path to them is across the double trapdoor trap that all mobs fall into. They fall into a water stream that sends them into some soul campfires, and they get toasted and I get gunpowder. So right now it's pretty basic. It's not functioning because it's only about half done maybe. And I'm not super happy with the color. Like, I like the idea of green and green glass. It's green concrete because it does kind of match the lush cave. But I'm thinking I might use the concrete for maybe some minor highlights and create some more metal or gray kind of frame to it. I think what I want to do is have it suspended in the cave with like arms or some sort of supports that are like going up to the lush cave. The more that I spend building in the lush cave, the more I want to maintain the lush cave, but then build like sci-fi walkways and like, you know how in Star Wars every walkway has no railings, just this narrow thing that spans these giant chasms. And I feel like that's going to be a good way to like look around the lush cave and see cool stuff, like have a pathway that goes across it, and then to the left you can see, you know, the creeper farm and the squid farm, and then maybe there's going to be something else down there that I have. And so we're going to mess around and see what I can come up with. But right now they're just going to be collected in a chest. I might want to actually have them drop out of the farm to like visually have that motion happening, and then like maybe they go down into some sort of boiling pot or some sort of like thing down below. And if I have a sugarcane farm nearby, maybe I can just make the rockets there, or maybe I have to ship the gunpowder out and I'm gonna make the rockets somewhere else. So the idea is that I want to make some of these items, but then also use the crafter to like really make my life as simple as possible. So I'm okay with overkill in terms of like more gunpowder than I need, more paper than I need, so that whenever I go to a shulker box for rockets, it's just full. Like I always have, you know, enough rockets to do stuff with. So that's the goal. It's just a matter of like where we're going to go from here.
Yeah, it's huge for quality of life to have like automatically farmed rockets. But how does it feel to be making farms? Because I feel like for a while in West Hill, it was like you only ever got to make a farm when you were sort of, I'm taking a break from West Hill, going here and there and like fixing the iron farm or making the moss bone meal contraption or whatever. But like this is now a project where you feel more comfortable integrating farms that feel good to be back on the technical side of things.
Yeah, it's fun to be on the technical side. It's challenging when you have to think about how you want to decorate these things. And I'm trying not to fall into the trap of like just building the farm functionally and then moving on to like another farm functionally and forgetting to go back and decorate it. So like the shulker box farm on the surface, I want to decorate that. But the challenge there is that you either have to spawn proof any blocks that you put close enough to it to decorate it, or make sure that no blocks are within 8 blocks of the outer edge. So that's the teleport distance of a potential shulker box on the edge. So you want to make sure that everybody stays inside the farm. And me thinking about like, well, how can I do that and have it look cool? Like, I don't want to just build another box 8 blocks, you know, around the whole thing. I want to try and create a shape or some sort of interesting idea, maybe a force field or something holding it in. I don't really know. So I haven't really got that far yet. I do know that I want to try and put some signs with glow ink on them to kind of hide the scaffolding, because the scaffolding doesn't really look very sci-fi.
Sure,
and I also am looking into a couple of other things. I think chests, scaffolding, and there was 1 or 2 other blocks that I thought, you know, it might be worth doing like a custom sci-fi texture. Like even if the scaffolding is just like metal colored, it will just blend a little bit better with what I'm doing. I haven't decided how far down that rabbit hole I want to go though. I do know that chests right now don't look all that great. So shulker boxes are going to be a much better box or storage unit to blend in with any kind of sci-fi zone. So the good news is I've got lots of them, so like I can kind of default to shulker boxes now instead of chests. And I do have that mod that labels the top of a shulker box with an item, so it becomes a lot easier to find out like what's in a shulker box. So That's kind of where I'm leaning right now. But yeah, it's good. It's fun to get in there. It's nice to test the knowledge. I had to do some bamboo farming for the scaffolding, and I had to do some sugarcane farming for rockets just briefly. I've got a couple of temporary things just set up next to my staging area. And it's nice to kind of remember, like, oh yeah, I've got the knowledge to do this. Like I've built this enough times, or I've seen this enough times where I can just understand how it's going to work, put together a couple of things. Like the first time I did the squid farm for the glow ink, I didn't build the tank big enough, and I just did a test. I just put it together. I knew it would function, and it was collecting some fish, but I was like, well, that's not really working. So I think maybe I'm just statistically don't have enough spawning spaces in the farm. And when I expanded the tank to like a 10 by 5, immediately we started to get glowing. So it was just a matter of like a little test, and it was nice for that one because I wasn't following a tutorial online. Like I was just kind of winging it based on the mechanics. So I'm going to try to do more of that when it comes to the simple farms. There are some mechanics that I'm behind on, so I have been watching some YouTube videos. But when it comes to things like a dye farm or a flower farm or things like that, some of which I won't be able to do in the mushroom biome, depends on what I need to do. So I have to kind of figure out where I'm going to get those things. So thankfully I have this giant lush cave, and there's multiple lush caves underneath the island. So if I need something that is not available in a mushroom island biome, then I can always try to find a lush cave and put it there. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm looking forward to figuring out some designs on my own and maybe coming up with something new. But also, if it's something as complicated as a shulker farm, like I just kind of went to the internet and said, like, okay, how do I even do this?
Yeah, makes sense. I think the boldest choice in the shulker farm is using red sandstone for everything. I'm like that feels expensive to me as someone who's not done a great deal of that in this survival world. I've done a fair bit in Misadventures now, but yeah, the red sandstone is an interesting contrast with the mycelium, I suppose. At least it stands out.
It was more that it matched the scaffolding. Like it was enough of a warm color that it matched the scaffolding, but then it also was high enough contrast. Because I tried sandstone and I tried red nether brick to like as like a high contrast and like a low contrast, and the orange just kind of won me over. And again, like I'm being pulled towards colors that I've just not been using that much in Resto.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So having some neon orange felt like it was probably some cool opportunities to do some fun sci-fi stuff later. And I will say we have a crafting data pack on the Citadel, so we can make red sandstone. We don't have to go collect
it. Makes sense.
I think it's 2 sandstone blocks and 1 red dye gives you 2 red sandstone blocks. I think that's how it works. There's a different ratio for dyeing sand. So you can dye sand and make sandstone, or you can mine sandstone and dye sandstone. So it just depends on how you want to roll. So, and I didn't really tweak that. I want to say that's a vanilla tweaks recipe. So however they had originally set it up is the ratio that you get. Originally, I think for vanilla tweaks, it was designed for something like the Hermitcraft server, where you've got a lot of very high producing creators on one server, and red sand would be at a premium.
Yeah.
And so to avoid those problems, they just create the data pack to craft it, and then you're really only having to go and collect sand, which there's a lot more deserts full of sand than there is red sandstone for sure.
Yeah, you get multiple layers of sand in a desert for one thing. But yeah, excited to have the technical update, and looking forward to seeing what you do if you come back and decorate some of those.
Moving on to the news, we've got a lot to talk about this week. Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.9, the Copper Age, was released on Tuesday, September 30th. In the Copper Age, we have the Copper Chest, a new type of chest that has waxed and oxidized variants. Copper chests oxidize over time and can be waxed like other copper blocks. The Copper Chest can be crafted using a chest and 8 copper ingots. The Copper Golem is in the game now, a new mob which can be spawned by placing a jack-o'-lantern or carved pumpkin on top of a copper block. Copper Golems oxidize over time and can be waxed like copper blocks. If the Copper Golem is fully oxidized and not waxed, it will turn into a Copper Golem statue. Upon turning into a statue, the Copper Golem will drop any item they may be holding. The statue retains the Copper Golem's name. Copper Golems can help with sorting items into chests. Interacting with the Copper Golem with an empty hand will make it drop its carried item. Iron Golems will occasionally plant a decorative flower onto a nearby Copper Golem. The flower can be removed with shears. This flower is dropped when the Copper Golem turns into a Copper Golem statue. Copper Golem item sorting is in the game. If the Copper Golem is not holding an item, it will look for a nearby copper chest to try to pick up an item. The Copper Golem will look into any oxidized and waxed copper chest variant to pick up items. At most, it can pick up 16 items in a stack at a time. Any item in a copper chest can be picked up. If the Copper Golem is holding an item, it will look for a nearby chest to try to place the item in. The Copper Golem will look in chests and trapped chests to try to place items. It can place an item in a chest if it's empty, or if it contains the same type of item that it's holding in its hand. The Copper Golem will visit at most 10 chests or copper chests in sequence to try to pick up or place an item. If no matching chest is found, the Copper Golem will idle for 7 seconds before trying again. The search area for chests for the Copper Golem's position is horizontally 32 blocks and vertically 8 blocks. The Copper Golem statue block is a new type of decorative block which has waxed and oxidized variants. The Copper Golem statue oxidizes over time and can be waxed like other copper blocks. If the Copper Golem statue has no oxidation when interacted with using an axe, the statue will turn into a Copper Golem. The Copper Golem statue can be in one of 4 poses: standing, sitting, running, and star. The pose of the statue can be changed by interacting with it. Each pose emits a different redstone comparator signal. There's new copper equipment in the game. There's the copper nugget, copper armor, the copper helmet, chestplate, leggings, and boots. Copper armor has higher durability than leather and gold. Copper armor has slightly less enchantability than iron. Added copper tools and weapons: the copper axe, hoe, pickaxe, shovel, and sword. Copper tools and weapons do the same amount of damage as stone, but have a higher durability. Copper tools work faster and last longer than stone, and copper tools have higher enchantability than diamond, but slightly less than iron. Copper equipment can be crafted and repaired with copper ingots. Copper equipment turns into copper nuggets when smelted. Added copper horse armor. Has the same loot table and chance of generating as iron horse armor, and copper horse armor has a toughness of 4. There are now copper decorations in the game. Added the copper torch, a green variant of the torch crafted from a copper nugget, coal, and a stick, functionally identical to the torch. Added copper bars, functionally identical to the existing iron bars made from copper and oxidizes over time. Added the copper chain, functionally identical to the existing chain, now renamed the iron chain, and made from copper, and it also oxidizes over time. Added the copper lantern, crafted similarly to regular lanterns, but uses copper and copper torches. The lantern itself oxidizes, changing its looks as it ages, functionally identical to the lantern. The shelf is now in the game, and the shelf is a new type of decorative block which comes with 12 different wood types. The shelf can be crafted from 6 matching blocks of any stripped log, stripped stem, or block of stripped bamboo, filling the top and bottom row in the crafting table. This produces 6 shelves. The shelf can store up to 3 item stacks. Interacting with any of the 3 slots on the front swaps the player's main hand item with the content of that slot. The shelf displays all items it contains in front of it, similar to an item frame. While a shelf is powered by redstone, its front texture changes to reflect that it is powered. When powered, up to 3 shelves will connect to each other. Interacting with a single powered shelf swaps all of its contents with the 3 rightmost items on the player's hotbar. Interacting with 2 connected shelves swaps their contents with the 6th rightmost items in the player's hotbar, and interacting with 3 connected shelves swaps the contents with all of the items in a player's hotbar. It does not matter which of the connected shelves the player interacts with. Lightning rods now oxidize like other copper blocks. And in the end, we have light flashes. The end dimension now has skylight. Normally, the skylight does not affect how the dimension looks. From time to time, flashes will appear in the sky, accompanied by a rumbling sound. When flashes occur, skylight intensity increases, flooding the dimension with purple light. While the Ender Dragon fog effect is active, the flash source in the sky is not visible. The hide sky flashes accessibility option disables the end flashes. When the flash is disabled by the setting, the world is not lit by the flash, but the flash source is still visible in the sky, and the sound effect still plays.
Some other new features in 1.21.9 for servers. The Minecraft Server Management Protocol adds a server management API for dedicated servers, Chat drafts now allow unsent chat messages to be saved as drafts if the chat prompt was forced to close. And a server code of conduct can now appear when connecting to a multiplayer server, requiring players to accept before they can play on the server. In sounds, some sound sliders in the music and sound options now play a preview sound when adjusting the setting outside of a world. In accessibility features, the attack, destroy, and use item place block keybinds are now toggleable. They've added invert mouse X options to the mouse setting screen to invert the X axis, and a sprint window option to the controls screen. Multiple keybinds that have the same key assigned to them can now work together, and the spectator hotbar menu key can be rebound. Some more changes to existing features in 1.21.9. There are some performance improvements. The chain block, as we mentioned before, has been renamed to Iron Chain. Monster spawn eggs now have a tooltip warning when the difficulty is set to peaceful. The mob will no longer spawn for 1 tick when an attempt is made to use the spawn egg on that difficulty setting. Changes have been made to world loading and the spawn chunks. A dimension that has any player activity, force-loaded chunks, active portals, or ender pearls in flight will be considered active and will keep processing chunks and entities. Previously, this would only apply if a player was in the dimension or if a chunk was force-loaded. They've reworked the debug overlay to be less cluttered and more configurable. Players seen in the game world of the current server are now always shown in the social interactions screen, even if they are offline. Players will now stop flying when switching from spectator mode to creative mode if they are near the ground. A player is considered to be near the ground if there's a collidable surface within 1 block below them. Flight will no longer be disabled if the player was inside a block or collidable entity, and this is to prevent players from suddenly falling through the ground. They've migrated several server properties into game rules. OpenGL 3.3 is now required to play the game, up from version 3.2, but this does not change the posted minimum requirements. And many of these changes are explained in more detail on the Minecraft.net changelog for update 1.21.9, along with a long list of technical changes and bug fixes. You'll find the changelog linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com. Since then, Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.10 got a Release Candidate 1 posted to Minecraft.net. This was released on Thursday, October 2nd, to address some bugs that became apparent with the release of the Copper Age drop. So there are only 6 or 7 bugs in this one, including entities in cobwebs clipping through pistons, items glitching inside a piston head when pushed through powder, snow, or cobwebs, the behavior of wind charges when colliding with certain blocks being different, chunks not loading while the player was being teleported, rooms with carpet on the floor not being able to have maps in item frames placed on walls touching the floor, repeating or chain command blocks with any form of the TP player command didn't constantly teleport the player to one spot, and they've also fixed an issue that caused entities on bubble columns to fly up unusually high in the air. So all of those fixes are now in a release candidate. We're probably expecting to see that 1.21.10 release sometime this week. You can find that over at Minecraft.net, and you can find it linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
We're going to be talking about our plans for the Copper Age in the main discussion this week. So right now, I guess we can just kind of focus on the hotfix and the scheduling. And I mean, really, looking forward to Mounts of Mayhem snapshots coming up.
Yeah, it's always been going to be exciting to try out some new stuff. Obviously, we've seen the Nautilus in action in the Minecraft Live presentation we had recently, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that feels to build with, if it's really any different to like swimming and building and that kind of thing. A few people have made some quite interesting points about how the Nautilus seems to reduce the amount of time it takes to break stuff underwater, which we know Aqua Affinity does, but if you're swimming or if you're riding some other kind of mob, typically the time to break is increased, or there's like a multiplier applied to how long it takes to break something, whereas the Nautilus seems to allow you to build as though you were building on the surface quite normally. So there's maybe a couple of like fringe cases where that could be kind of useful, but for now I'm just looking forward to seeing it in action. The thing I was kind of curious about this week as well is that with this hotfix, followed by Mounts of Mayhem, 1.21 is going to be the version with the highest number of minor updates. The record was previously held by version 1.7, which got to 1.7.10 before the 1.8 update arrived. So I'm expecting that, judging by the way Mojang are producing these minor gameplay drops lately, along with this sort of cycle of hotfixes all using the same numbering convention, we're probably going to see a few more minor updates before we see a 1.22. at any point. So I'm kind of interested to see how high they get and what the new benchmark is for how many minor updates we can expect appended to one of these major releases.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to continue with the same numbering convention. They might find something that works better for them with the new drop cycle. I mean, as long as it's clear for us, then I think that's probably the key thing, is to keep it clear for players and for people talking about it, especially us here on the show. I prefer the simple number progression than having certain things in special features or experimental features within the snapshot where you don't know at any point when that experimental feature will or maybe won't come into the game. I always found that a little bit confusing when they did it before. So I'm glad that, unlike last year, this year the Copper Age is basically out. 1.21.9 is done, minus the little hotfix. But like that's not going to be something where the Mounts of Mayhem is happening within. Like Mounts of Mayhem is the next thing. It's a separate thing. And I think that that's clear to players and clear to us. And I think it's going to be better to talk about it in that way. Speaking of Mounts of Mayhem, like I kind of feel like I don't think next week would be a new snapshot. Happy to have it if that's when it comes out. But given that there's a hotfix for the Copper Age, I'm guessing October 21st, maybe the 28th would be the first snapshot for Mounts of Mayhem. But it could be the 14th. I guess it depends on like how ready they are. And I guess we do know that they're different teams, right? Like when the Copper Age is out, like the same team that's on the Copper Age is not necessarily the same team that's on the Mounts of Mayhem, from what we've learned before. So at least that way it could be not relying on the other in order to have new snapshots come out.
Yeah, and after a certain point, maybe there's like a technical team that deals with the bug fix side of things, is responsible for this latest hot fix and cleaning up some of the code and so forth, so that we end up with the gameplay developers being able to work on the newer features. But yeah, either way, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly the snapshots start. I would honestly expect them to be out October 14th, because then there's probably only about 6 weeks before they want to release Mounts of Mayhem to begin with. So I expect they'll want to get these features into player hands sooner rather than later. And if they've got a playable version that they were demonstrating in the Deep Dig show afterwards, where they had like players and content creators and stuff come in and like race against the developers and so forth, I think there's probably going to be a version of this playable in players' hands pretty quickly. Either way, looking forward to diving into that. But we've also got some chunk mail about it this week. So should we roll on into chunk mail?
Sure. Sounds like a plan. If you would like to email the show, it is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please try to keep those concise. It does help them get in the show if you're on point. And let us know if you're a patron as well, because it's nice to know what members of our community are also thinking about when it comes to emailing the show. So once again, spawnchunkmail@gmail.com.
This one comes in from Anima with the subject of opportunities to improve mounts. Hello, Joel and Johnny. I think the Mounts of Mayhem would be a perfect opportunity to improve existing mounts. I've always had a gripe with saddled horses wandering around when being left by the player. In my experience, a horse is fully capable of standing still while being in work mode. For Minecraft, that could simply mean putting a saddle on a horse would be like telling a dog to sit. In brackets, the fact that we can make cats sit in Minecraft and not have horses stand still is insane to me. If you want your horse to roam around in a pasture, just take the saddle off, like you would with an actual horse. There are other small things with horses that could be improved, like riding upstairs, for example, but this one thing is my main issue. Pretend you use horses. What would you want approved with the mounts we already have? Anima happily relives her childhood with actually trained horses. I like the fact that Anima is under no illusions about the fact that we don't use horses. I think we might have mentioned it on the show before, and that's stuck with them. But like, pretend you use horses for a second. It's like, you know us too well, I think, Anima.
Well, also, two endgame players, like, Elytra is just faster to get around. So unless you have a very specific, like, RP use or specific mechanical use for the horse, then you're probably not going to be using them. Case in point, I think this year on Hermitcraft, they said like everybody's going to try to use horses for at least a little while before they get Elytra, just to kind of like try to create some different gameplay. I feel like in general for me, livestock roaming around without being leashed limits their use creatively in builds, whether that's horses, cows, pigs, anything. And Anima has a solid idea with saddling horses staying still. I think that's a really great way to do it. Very simple, very straightforward, would not even need an explanation. I think it would be pretty obvious that when you put a saddle on a horse and you walk away from it and you come back after whatever you get distracted doing and the horse is still sitting exactly where it was, then like it's pretty clear that the saddle, is helping in that way. We can't put saddles on every passive mob yet, but I've often thought that having a block that certain mobs would be attracted to would be a great way to kind of keep them from wandering off. So think like a feeding trough for pigs or a chicken coop for chickens. I mean, in both of those cases, maybe a composter could be used. I'm thinking in the same way that a villager with a profession doesn't wander too far from their profession block. There's like a radius that they're going to stick to. They still wander around freely, but they're not going to like walk over the hills or walk away. You're not going to lose your cows and your chickens and your horses without fencing them in. Because I've always wanted to have more custom walls and custom borders to my areas, and unless it's a Minecraft fence or something 2 blocks tall or taller than a block, then horses and other mobs can walk over it and just kind of walk away. So I think it would be cool to have different ways to wrangle them. But when it comes to actual improvements to the mounts, I think for me, the things that are frustrating with a horse are when you're using one early game and you're trying to travel and you got to go across a river. You either get thrown off or it becomes really difficult to try and maneuver the river, which I guess feels kind of natural in terms of like it would be difficult to get a horse to swim across the river as well, provided that they're not, it's deep enough that they can't touch the bottom. I feel like that for the sake of gameplay, even though it's not very realistic, could be improved. I think it would be nice to be able to just kind of swim across. I haven't tried it in a long time, so correct me if I'm misremembering. But I also wonder if horses could be faster on ice. We know we've got different speeds of horses. You can breed them up. I don't like boats. I find them very tedious and hard to steer. If horses were not as fast as boats, but faster than they were on land on ice, that could be kind of fun. That could be kind of a fun way to have like a different kind of horse ice race, or use horses in the nether to speed around on your different tracks. That could be kind of cool. And I also wonder if, I know the camel puts you high enough that you can't get hit by mobs. Can you still get hit by mobs on a horse with a zombie?
Yeah,
like
I believe so. I think that's
Yeah.
how it became one of the selling points of the camel, was the
Camel,
fact that
right.
it was different to horses. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always found with a horse, like when you're mounted, it's difficult to then attack the thing that's attacking you. So you have to dismount. You'll get hit again because it's a baby zombie and it's fast. So it would be kind of cool if the horse had like a kick, like an attack where you could like either front kick or back kick. And I mean, part of me just wants to yeet a baby zombie halfway across the plains biome by kicking it with a horse. There'd be an immense amount of satisfaction there. But that could be kind of some fun ways to increase the mounts, especially because with the spear, they're sort of leaning into mounted combat.
Yeah.
And if you had like an additional thing that the mount would do, that could be really fun. Imagine if maybe not the sniffer, but something sniffer-like that the player could get that would rival a hoglin or be able to fight a ravager, where you could mount it and then charge in and do the same sort of thing. Like maybe not a rhinoceros, is kind of an odd animal to have, but like if something made up in Minecraft in the same way that the sniffer is a made up animal, that was a player friendly mob that you could ride and use as like a battering ram. I mean, that could be kind of fun. So those are the kind of things I think of when I think about improving mounts.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first thought, was let us ride Ravagers. I do think it'd be fun if there was something like the Ravager equivalent of the Happy Ghast, where there was like a slightly more pleasant Ravager, or maybe it could even, now that we have Allays and Vexes, and there's the sort of two sides of like, we found Vexes originally sort of with the Evokers in Woodland Mansions, and Ravagers have obviously come up since Pillager Patrols. I wonder if there is a creature that started like before Ravagers became a thing, and then the Pillagers have just sort of, chained it quite clearly with the texture of the Ravager and, warped it to their own ends. I wonder if there could maybe be some kind of more peaceful, lumbering, massive creature that's just like out there in savannas or something like that. Sort of the equivalent, the Minecraft equivalent of an elephant or something like that. Could be kind of neat to have and to be rode. I do understand why we can't ride the existing Ravagers, partly because I think it would trivialize some aspects of Pillager raids if you can just right-click the mount as it comes towards you, because half the time they're not even being rode by an Illager. But also, if you let players ride Ravagers, then it's a slippery slope to players wanting to be both spider jockeys and chicken jockeys. And as we've learned on my channel recently, that's you can be either a baby zombie, a villager, or a witch, and those are the only things that are allowed to ride chickens. But yeah, the whole idea between horses being more obedient and also giving them more functionality, it's tricky because I think the obedience of horses is part of the reason why leashes exist in the first place. Like, why we have leads is to lead mobs around, sure, but also to tie them to fence posts. And that feels like the kind of, you're hitching up your horse in front of the saloon kind of thing. It makes that sort of roleplay-esque gameplay feel sort of unnecessary if the horse is just going to do what you say 100% of the time anyway. I can understand it still like needing to be leashed up if you wanted to roam around a certain point, but you just took the saddle off and that allowed it to have more free roaming behavior. I think, yeah, it's nice to imagine that there are going to be some quality of life changes to mounts like this down the line. So it could be that if this kind of idea gains traction, then they'll think about it. But I think it makes sense for now to be a time to look at that stuff, like you said, with them thinking more about mounted combat and weapons that are useful in mounted combat. So definitely food for thought.
Moving on to the main discussion, we're going to talk about the Copper Age and our plans looking forward to this update. I will let everyone know that as of right now, the Citadel has not yet updated to the Copper Age. Since we knew it was coming and I knew that I was going to have to wait for some mods to update, we are still on 1.21.5 on the Citadel. We will be updating soon, though. Several of the functioning mods, the performance mods that we use to kind of keep things running smoothly, have already been updated to 1.21.9. It's just a matter of a couple of the mods that I use personally on my client side stuff, just for interactions and maps and like things that I find I like for content creation. I want those to update as well. So once I get there, then we'll be updating to 1.21.9. I still have some like imaginary plans, but I don't have any hands-on just yet. But you do, as you mentioned earlier in the show.
Yes, yeah. I even spent a video going over each of the new additions, at least the survival stuff. I haven't looked too deeply into stuff like, the F3 debug config stuff. I've got that roughly where I want it. The kind of information that I thought was superfluous for the F3 screen is now mostly gone. And I haven't been to the end yet, so I haven't seen the end light flashes and things like that. But those were sort of minor, sort of extra little fun things for me rather than being the features that I really wanted to deep dive. So yeah, I crafted a bunch of the new copper bars and started letting them oxidize out in the open. I had a lightning rod outside of my storage hall that started to oxidize before I was even planning to talk about it in the video. So yeah, I've started to see those little changes happening to stuff that was pre-existing in the world, and it's quite neat to see that. I'm very happy that I've had a bee farm for a while, because I will definitely need honeycomb for a lot more of these features if I want to keep using them. But yeah, the first things I noticed really were that Copper Golem statues are very easy to create now. For anybody who wants to use those and during the snapshots was worried that it would take absolutely ages for the oxidized Copper Golems to freeze, you can create an oxidized Copper Golem now, and it will freeze probably within about a minute of you making it. So by the time I'd gone into my storage system to get a couple of things and come back out, one of the golems had already frozen.
Wow.
It still takes them a while to age, but once they're oxidized, they like freeze pretty quickly. So if you're just after the statues and you don't care much for the functionality of the Copper Golem, just get a bunch of blocks of oxidized copper, drop a pumpkin on, and wait like a couple of minutes, and you'll have a bunch of frozen statues that you can do what you will with. I think that's actually going to be a really fun way of taking them to and from locations where you want to use the actual copper golem as
Right.
well. Have
Yeah.
them be more portable in the same way that people wish you could put more stuff in buckets. You can bring a copper golem with you as a statue, because one of the things I found while setting up my storage system was that I don't want the copper golems marching around when I still haven't finished building the walls of like the little tank in which I wanted them to live, but I still wanted to put a copper chest at the end there, and it's a double chest to make sure that it can hold all of the different items I might want to throw in. But then when I created a copper golem in that space, it throws another copper chest at me, because of course it like starts on top of a copper chest and it creates a copper chest every time you spawn in a copper golem. So I thought, well, if I just make a ton of the statue versions, I can just drop them in, tap them a few times with an axe, and they'll spring to life and do whatever they do from there. So I think that's going to be a pretty neat thing to have handy, is like a little copper golem army that you can just put in a shulker box somewhere and, you know, use them as an item and a block until you want to use them as an entity. I think it's smart that they have that functionality. On the flip side, if you wanted to keep them oxidized but active, all you need to do is bring a stack of honeycomb with you, and as soon as you spawn one of these things in, they will still work for a short while, so just got to make sure you wax them before you do anything else, and they'll stay pristine in that condition. So I think that's kind of smart. I think they're getting the best of the both worlds with the general sort of setup with the copper golem right now. Outside of the copper golem, I have not done a ton of building with the bars and additional blocks and stuff. I have been building a little bit with shelves so far, and I really like using them decoratively. I think those are... I think it's funny that Mojang was surprised initially that people wanted to use the shelf for decorative purposes, but I just look at this thing and I'm like, yeah, it's not just a vertical slab. It has a bunch of like texture to it and is obviously based on the stripped wood textures, but I think they're a really great addition to things like the curvature of arches. You know, you end up with like ornamental sections where an arch ends that feel a lot more natural to sort of, you know, taper down to a finer point than leaving some stairs in the corner and calling it a day, or using trapdoors, which I think is the other option players were already kind of using. You want something slightly thicker than a trapdoor to make a wall out of. You want something that is in all of the wood types, doesn't have any transparency. So like, you know, if you wanted to make a wall out of oak trapdoors, you would have to have something behind it, otherwise you'd be able to see through it. But if you make a wall out of oak shelves, it's going to be perfectly opaque and very useful for like concealing stuff behind a fairly small, slim barrier. I think shelves are as good as I expected them to be. The only minor issue that I sort of will nitpick at this point is that some wood types, because it's the stripped log texture, doesn't match the plank texture super well. Right. So if you're using something like oak or even pale oak, I've found these, like, those two fit really well with the plank color, temperature, and everything. But if you use dark oak, which is what I'm using in my storage system, I found that the dark oak shelf doesn't match dark oak planks as closely as I would like. But again, that's the kind of thing that can be remedied if you wanted to with a resource pack. So not the worst thing in the world. And I think just for the functionality of them and the building block nature of them, I think shelves are already some of my favorite additions in recent memory.
Yeah, you forget how much lighter stripped dark oak is to the planks.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant difference. It's sort of like how I feel like dark oak logs go better with spruce planks because of the slight grey element to the dark oak log, whereas spruce logs go really well with dark oak planks because they still have that kind of warm red undertone to them that, like, yeah, it's subtle, but it's there, and builders, I imagine, have been swapping those two around a fair bit just to try and figure out what works better.
Oh, as somebody that spent a lot of time doing that in Westdale, like choosing different blocks and different stripped wood for framing buildings and stuff, like, yeah, there's definitely a couple of pairings that are not what you'd expect. And then there's something like, there's also the drastic difference between something like birch, and with the stripped birch being so light compared to I mean, it's the same color as the planks, but like the texture is so different. So I do find them a little bit challenging to work with. For me, the shelves that I've got on my radar are the dark oak, not because I'm going to be using it with any other wood types, but because it's the darkest one. So if I want something that's as close to a black shelf as I can get, right now there is no black shelf because we can't make them out of stone or any kind of like bricks, like the nether bricks or something. So the dark oak is the closest to black. I'm probably not going to use it in like a prominent thing. It's probably going to be something where I'd want to put something on a shelf, like a light block, like a frog light or a shroom light or a sea lantern, or create some sort of pattern with that and concrete blocks, and have that be like track lighting or some sort of detail within a crevice on a build, like not like on the edge, but something that's going to have something over it and under it, where chances are you're not going to be able to really see the color of the dark oak anyway. So that's what's on my list. But also, because neutral, the pale oak is pretty flexible and
Yeah.
doesn't really read as wood depending on the context. I think you can put it next to some quartz and it still looks pretty good. I've seen it used in columns and pillars and stuff, and it looks like it matches the stone pretty well. And then acacia, because a lot of sci-fi stuff, at least depending on the kind of stuff you're looking at, there's a lot of white and orange, I guess, in
Yeah,
sci-fi.
I was
Or
thinking
the
like
orange.
Star Wars, like Rebel ships having like the white and orange thing going on. That makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then you've got the orange that you can use in different ways. The orange trapdoor from Acacia is also pretty flexible. Like it doesn't look as, it could be like, it looks kind of like a grill. So
Yeah.
you can kind of see, it reminds me of some of the grill pieces from Lego actually that they kind of use for highlights and details. So there's some things there that I might want to look into. Whereas other things like an oak trapdoor or a spruce trapdoor really don't jive all that well with sci-fi builds. So I'm using those more for technical stuff. Whereas the acacia and the, I guess the trapdoors from pale oak are still pretty like wooden shutter looking, but the shelf itself is going to be more flexible. So those are the shelf variants that I'm looking at least for now. And I don't know if I'm going to be using them for actual builds in the way that you were describing, in terms of like something thinner than a trapdoor, or thicker than a trapdoor but thinner than a slab, and we'll have to see. But we can put them in different orientations, and putting them back to back creates a really unique look. So like I'm thinking of like a fin on a ship or something, like
Yeah.
like a spoiler or any kind of thing that needs to be thinner than a block, but we don't really have vertical. And then a trapdoor, because of a trapdoor texture, is just going to look like a bunch of trapdoors stuck together. So the
Hmm.
shelves, I think, could be potentially really cool, especially if you want different colors. If it's a big enough fin or wing, then you might be able to have like, warped shelves along the edge, and then pale oak trapdoors in the middle, like, and give it like a blue edge, or any kind of like leading edge on builds like that are really cool. So I'm mostly thinking about the sci-fi area and the stuff that I'm planning on in that way. And I don't know about the copper golem. Like for me, other than what we talked about earlier, like sorting shulker boxes would be convenient, but I'd have to set up a pretty permanent area for that. So like I don't know where that is yet. I don't know what level it's going to be on. I'm not sure where it's going to be. So I haven't really got that far. However, when we're talking about automation and shulker boxes, so I want to make a tree farm where probably TNT based, where I can get a lot of logs, make a lot of planks, make a lot of chests, and then combine the output of my shulker box farm with the output of a chest factory and make shulker boxes. Well, I could also dye those and then have the copper golems sort those into various chests, because we can't necessarily sort those ourselves because of the signal that they put out. You can't have a stack of shulker boxes. Like a chest of shulker boxes is only 27. You can't like fill it up more than that. So I'm curious as to, I'm pretty sure I can get a copper golem to sort like a yellow shulker box from a green shulker box. And if I can do that,
Hmm.
then just like you've set up with your key chest, I could do that for a shulker box facility where I could walk into a storage room and it's going to be nothing but the 16 different colors, or I guess 17 with the natural shulker boxes, uh, colors of shulkers. And I could just like grab whichever one I want, rather than what I'm doing right now, which is like going to get shells, getting a chest, making a shulker box, going to my dye box, grabbing the color I want, dye it. It would be just nice to walk over to a bunch of different chests to just know that I've got full access to whatever color shulker box I need. The moment that I take one, it's probably going to be replaced by something coming in from behind. So like that could be a really, really fun project to potentially use the copper golems. Other than that, I could see myself using them as more flavor. Like I could see myself making some sort of like control room and just like trying to have some items going back and forth between a couple of chests that you can't really see, but the copper golems can, just to see a bunch of little robots walking around doing stuff. Just make it look like they're busy doing things. I think that could be kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about doing sci-fi stuff, and I know Star Wars isn't going to be the chief inspiration necessarily for what you have in mind, but anyone who's building something Star Wars style, you could go a lot worse than the Copper Golem for something like an astromech droid. You know, you could have like a little guy sort of walking around a spaceport somewhere, just kind of carrying something to and fro, like they're unloading a ship for you or whatever. There are lots of different ways that they can be used creatively like that, and I think that's one of the fun things about them, really. You don't have to stick to the functionality of them, especially if you're one of the folks who has found their functionality a little bit lacking. I've been keeping my ear to the ground as regards like community interactions with these, because not everybody like dives into the snapshots and stuff. A lot of people like to work with the finished features. And so I've already seen a few people saying that they're having issues with golems like following the same path and colliding with each other if they're going back and forth between two specific chests. That seems to be a concern, which is one of the reasons that I haven't put more than one copper golem in my storage system, is because I think they would probably end up colliding and holding each other up occasionally. But also I've seen people arguing that they don't want to design for the golem's behavior, they just want to be able to pop it down in their existing storage systems and have it go to work. And it's sort of unfortunate that that's not ultimately the way how they will work, but I think they would have to be much more complex under the hood for you to get that kind of functionality out of them. There would have to be a much broader range of chests, and therefore you would probably end up having a lot of players just waiting forever for the Copper Golem to come back to the start of their task or to check every chest in their storage system. With a storage room like mine, where there are multiple like double chests for each row of items, and there are, I think, 128 filters in there, chaos wouldn't work. Like, untenable, I think, in terms of like what you would want from the Copper Golem. So yeah, while it has limited functionality, I think it's limited for a reason. It helps keep things simple enough that players can hopefully understand them reasonably well. So yeah, like I don't have much more to say about the Copper Golem other than what I said earlier. Like, I think it's neat to have a storage system where you can take a hybrid approach to item filtering now. You can have a multi-item sorter going on behind the scenes. In sort of the more redstone capable of you will be able to put together a storage filter that works a lot faster than the Copper Golem will. But for folks like me who are, you know, sort of in the middle of the redstone like technical hierarchy, like I'm a practiced user of redstone. I'm not a redstone genius. Putting together something like this where a mob becomes a replacement for all of the more complex fiddly redstone, which again maybe allows for it to be tiled more easily, you know, at least like minimizes the amount of redstone component usage and minimizes the complexity of stuff behind the scenes. And I can deal with it being a little bit slower. I've got plenty of time for, you know, I just put a shulker box in the system from when I was building those like townhouses, the kind of multiple colors of townhouses where I've got different doors and trapdoors and slabs and, you know, pressure plates and all the kind of like bits and pieces that I've done for decorating all of those in all of the different wood types. And then the Copper Golem will just happily sort that stuff behind the scenes while I move on to whatever's next. I think it works quite smoothly for me at the moment. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the approach of all of the dyed blocks being sorted into different slices goes. If that's an approach I adopt going forward, or if I decide I actually need more room for all of the different colors of terracotta and whatnot. But I think the Copper Golem has a lot of potential to be used for a lot of different ways. Even you just saying shulker boxes kind of made me think, yeah, you could end up having it sort your redstone shulker boxes from your backup equipment shulker boxes and have those go into different places. I know that various people have done shulker box storage systems where you just kind of plug it in and it refills all of the items that were, you know, in that shulker box to begin with, and, you know, the Copper Golem could easily help with stuff like that. I think there's a lot of different applications for it, and it's just about finding the right place for them ultimately. But yeah, I've already I've shifted some of my filtered storage around in my main storage system now to break it out into all 4 different copper blocks as well, instead of just having oxidized copper and fresh copper, which is what I had before. So I feel like with all of the additional bars and the lightning rods oxidizing now, and chains and lanterns and all of that kind of stuff, I think those are the things that have prompted me to go, actually, yeah, I need independent storage for each different age of copper. Otherwise, all of the stuff in the oxidized chest is just going to be a jumble of everything that's not fresh, and it's just going to get overwhelming at that point.
Yeah, even the little bit of copper work I did at the end of West Hill in the basement, I had a texture pack from Vanilla Tweaks that puts like a little yellow highlight over your waxed versions of stuff.
Right, yeah.
And
yeah.
I didn't have any other way to sort between those two, but then even within the waxed or the unwaxed, you still had all the different variants. And so I can see that being overwhelming. I'm actually not sure how I'm going to use the new copper blocks yet. I haven't decided how grungy or gritty my sci-fi builds are going to be. Like, I don't know if they're going to be like super clean, like Tron, or if they're going to be more Star Wars-esque with like a lot of grime and some variants and stuff. Because one of the ways that you can use the chains when you combine them with existing chains and iron bars and the copper bars is it can make things look like they're rusting, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I've seen some really cool examples of having iron chains down into copper chains hovering over lava or cauldrons of lava, making it look like the chains are being forged or melted. And they're like, so that they're red hot, with the copper chain at the end of an iron chain. Some really interesting stuff like that. I don't know of anything right now in context where that's going to work. Maybe I'll have a really clean surface, but maybe below the surface, it'll be more industrial and a lot more of the melting and the mining that has to support all the cool stuff that's happening on the surface. I don't know. I haven't really thought that far ahead. So I haven't really thought much about the other copper blocks, with the exception of probably the lightning rod, because now that comes in the different variants and you can place it horizontally like you can end rods. I think I'll probably find uses for that in sci-fi situations like spires, or like not lasers, but like any kind of like pointy thing that you need in a very fine detailed build, satellite dish, or like something that needs those kind of like little greebles on it. They also look like wires. Like if you're not running them very long, you can kind of make a oxidized copper lightning rod look like it's a plug, on both ends.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're going to do with it. So, and you can also combine that with, for me, it would be like the unoxidized copper lightning rod, but then you combine that with either acacia shelves or stripped acacia logs. They can look like big orange cables if you decorate them right. And if it went right down to like a lightning rod, that would almost look like a plug that you might want to put into something. And if you had like a dropper on the wall, it would kind of look like a socket that it might go into. So I need to experiment with the different textures in Minecraft that are currently like functioning blocks, redstone blocks, things like observers. Like, what can I use around the sci-fi builds in different ways decoratively to make it look like electronics? And then what other things that you might not use could I use, like copper? And if that time comes, my plan is to go find a trial chamber and just ransack it, like just completely mine it out, and then just have a ton of the stuff whenever I need it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I was thinking about it, and now there are copper chests in the game as well. You effectively, if you don't plan on using the copper chest as an aesthetic, you now have 4 additional chests that you can retexture if they suit the aesthetic of your sci-fi zone better. I think the same goes for like copper lanterns as well. I think they fit the lantern aesthetic really nicely. They fit that sort of like pre-industrial Minecraft look, and they can feel a little bit steampunk for players who want to go that way. The same goes for using the lightning rods as like pipes and things like that. A lot of steampunk players really going to enjoy that aesthetic. But then if you want to retexture them, you now have way more options. You now have that full range of copper aged lanterns without having to worry about messing with the aesthetic of the original lantern if players are still using that in like medieval builds. So you could quite comfortably play with some of these new blocks and retexture them without knowing that it wouldn't affect what happened back in West Hill if you wanted to return to that area, right? So I think there's a good bit of room for experimentation there.
There's also, I don't remember what version of Minecraft this was added, but this was something we were talking about on my stream over the week, was you can now have texture packs loaded on servers based on where you are. So like you could
Yes,
go into
yes.
the sci-fi zone and it would just like auto download and tell you like you need to switch to this texture pack before you go any farther, or vice versa. You go from there to West Hill, and then when you land at that tower that I took you to in West Hill, before you're anywhere near West Hill, it would say load this texture pack, so that when you're in West Hill, you know what you're looking at is going to look the way that the creator intended. So I might look into that. It's right now it's above my pay grade, but I'm sure it's not so complicated because it's a folder on the server that you just have to tell your game like where to go to find it. So it doesn't seem like it's too complicated. I have yet to learn how it works.
Yeah. I think the one thing I've got my eye on for the future, and we'll probably wrap up the discussion here, is how to age a lot of this stuff. Because there are some things, because they aren't crafted using copper blocks, a lot of it is crafted using copper ingots or nuggets. You only ever get the fresh copper versions of them. And so I think players are going to have a fun time figuring out what the best solution is to oxidizing copper, lanterns, lightning rods, bars, that kind of stuff. I think my copper aging machine, as long as they aren't, I can't remember if lanterns break when you push them with a piston. I think they might do. So lanterns,
They do, yeah.
lanterns might not be a possibility, but I could still age bars that way. I'm pretty sure I could still age lightning rods that way. So I think more than ever, I'm going to need to, put the pedal to the metal with that and see if I can work up the latest version of David to get it functional soon, because people are going to need that. Anyway, for now, that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the stuff that we've talked about today and link to the show in general over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where lively discussion about Minecraft happens every single day. You also get to listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every Monday. We have our monthly hangouts and quarterly hangouts that I mentioned at the top of the show. It's a great time to be a patron, so stop on by. We currently have 270 patrons. Would love to add to that number. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. There is, of course, the video version on YouTube and later on Spotify. The email for the show is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch when I can, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series and playing other games from time to time. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft Recap, which is going to have its finale episode up this weekend. So, I'm pretty sure it should be out by the time you're listening to this. Aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. You can also listen to the latest episode of the Citadel Cafe at thecitadelcafe.com or on your favorite podcasting app. We talked about some of the new trailers for sci-fi movies coming out in the near future, so check that out. I'm Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m., Saturdays at 1, and mostly Minecraft right now, but of course we are working on the Lego Soundwave, which is on the desk behind me. So it's coming along very well, and some of the coolest things I've done in Lego in a long time have been happening on that stream. So check that out on Fridays.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and the Copper Golem will help us sort all of it.